My name is Greg DeVore. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ScreenSteps, and grateful you all came out here. We're going to talk a little bit today, or a lot, about how to transfer knowledge to your employees faster, and how do we decrease that onboarding time for agents by at least 50%. Now let's define what onboarding means, because it can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different organizations. This is not just that they're quote unquote on the phones. What we're defining here is when they're fully onboarded, they're fully ramped, they're fully proficient, they are handling calls correctly, confidently, and most importantly, independently. They are not turning to their supervisors for how do I do this, or their coworkers. That's what we mean by onboarding, because I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, how long does it take to onboard? They'll say 3 weeks. And I'll say, well, how long until they can work without constantly peppering their supervisor for assistance? They're like, oh, well, that's 6 to 12 months. That's a really different thing. So that's what we're talking about today. Why does this matter right now? Why is it becoming more important? Onboarding is becoming more and more difficult because the easy questions are handled by other systems. The only thing that's left for a human to do is the complex work. And so that means labor costs. I've talked to BPOs, they're having to increase the base salary because they need more knowledgeable employees for the programs they're getting. The employee turnover is increasing, and the longer that onboarding takes until they feel confident, those attrition rates go up. Productivity is down, especially as supervisors are overwhelmed with questions, and agents are stressed out, supervisors are burnt out. I've talked to supervisors, they're doing their work after work, because all they do all day is answer questions. And I've seen some heads nod, so this is resonating. So let me give you some hope. So here's 3 transformations, 3 very different industries. And when they went through this process, I'm going to teach you here in a bit, these are the results they saw. So the first, public utility, they dropped their time to proficiency. Now this sounds like a long time. 12 months until somebody could work independently. They dropped that down to less than 60 days. And they almost completely eliminated supervisor assists. That means that they were no longer having to ask supervisors questions. They've had to retrain their supervisors to teach them actually how to supervise people. Because before, they were just walking answer stations. Second group, this was technical support, taking it over from a third party, a BPO. They're bringing it back in-house, and they have no prior experience on this program. They have to ramp it up in 120 days. They took their training time down from 6 weeks down to 2 weeks, and they were leaving training hitting 98% QA scores and an SLA of 90. The third group, healthcare, dropped time to proficiency from 8 weeks down to 4 days, and most importantly for them, it took 30 days to cross-train on each region of the country they supported. They reduced that down to less than 1 day. Now, all of these are very different problems, very different situations, but the root cause was the same. The root cause was inefficient knowledge transfer. And the thing that they realized is this wasn't just a technology problem. This was a framing and behavioral problem. We'll talk about what that means in a second. But if you're looking at like some magic technology, I would love to sell it to you. You know, that you just turn it on and it magically makes people proficient. But you have to approach the problem differently. It's a methodology and a technology problem. There's a great book. It's called What's Your Problem by, I love this name, Thomas Wettlesberg. I don't even know if I can say it right. But in it, it's about how if you look at a problem, the way you frame a problem determines how you're going to solve it. And so if you reframe a problem, you can come up with much better solutions. He says the way you frame a problem determines which solutions you come up with. By shifting the way you see a problem, that is by reframing it, you can sometimes find radically better solutions. So how can we reframe this problem? When we talk about this problem, we say we need better training. We hear that all the time, and so we try all these different solutions of how we're going to do better training. It's impossible. You're trying to pour a gallon of water into a 16-ounce glass. It is never going to work. Doesn't matter how much you improve training, it's not going to work. Why? This chart shows here this graph. On the y-axis, we have complexity. On the x-axis, we have change. Think of your contact center. Where are you on this? If you're down here at this low part, that little blue dot, Training is going to work great for you. It's pretty easy to ramp someone up. It never changes. They're going to be able to memorize it, and they'll be able to work there forever. But if you're up here on where the red dot is, where you've got high complexity and high change, training can never be the answer, because as soon as they learn something, it's changed on them. If they memorize it, it's like memorizing the weather. What good is that? And the complexity is so high, they have to be there for years to really understand all the factors and nuances that are going to come into play. So when we look at this, we're like, what are we doing? Why are we trying to improve training? It can't ever work. So now we're going to reframe that. This is not about training. This is about knowledge transfer. How do we help them perform like an expert without having to spend years developing expertise? This right here, we said it was a framing problem and a behavioral problem. This is what we call the knowledge ops maturity model. It's a measure of how efficiently you transfer knowledge in your organization. And the important thing here is it is not about the technology you have. It is about the behavior of the people in the organization. So down here at level 1, we have tribal. Tribal means we're running on tribal knowledge. Everything is stuck in people's heads. So I learn by shadowing, I learn by lectures, I learn by searching through Slack or team messages or old emails. But I can ask 5 people how to do something and I'll get 6 different answers on that. So I have no consistency, almost impossible to scale. At the document stage, the business says, hey, we're done, we got to fix this. And so we're going to document everything. And they make all these SOPs and procedures and job aids. But then when you watch how people behave, when they don't know what to do, they behave exactly the same way as they did in a tribal organization. So the business, if you ask someone in charge of knowledge management, like, we're good, look at all that we've got. But you've put out this great spread and nobody's showing up to the party. And so you're not seeing any of the improvements. And that's why people move away from knowledge management, because they're like, we've done this, it's not working. At the guide stage, the behavior changes dramatically. The agent is following a digital guide. It could be a checklist, a decision tree, a reference article, whatever that is that they need, they're following it every single time, even when they know what to do. And that's like, oh, that's going to slow them down so much. The airline pilot, whoever took the flight here, they're not using a pre-flight checklist because they don't know how to fly. It's not because they're 1 month on the job. It's because it helps them work more efficiently and consistently and confidently. The same thing is true in the contact center. When we get to the train stage, we flip training on its head. We're no longer trying to cram information into their head. Instead of getting them to memorize a book of maps, we're going to teach them how to use a GPS. And they'll be able to go anywhere. And I'll go into a little bit more of that. And then accelerate, it's pretty awesome when you get to this stage, the agents are actually contributing back, optimizing the guides with you. The whole organization is becoming more efficient in what you're doing. So how do you move up this model? This is the framework that we teach. It's called the Find and Follow framework. And so if you don't get everything I'm going to show you in the next couple minutes here, we've got it in a book, we've got a course online, so you don't need to write down all the notes or take pictures of all the slides. But the purpose of this is to give you an overview of what this means and what it would look like. The keys to this framework are, and we've never had this framework fail. When somebody implements this, it works every time. We reframe the problem, we change the behavior, and we impact the results. So first we have to throw away some limiting beliefs. If you've ever worked in therapy, a limiting belief is a belief you have that holds you back from reaching your full potential. So first limiting belief is training needs to focus on what agents need to know. Well, that's impossible. If we're dealing with that complexity, that's too much information. Instead, we're going to focus on what they need to do. Second, agents who memorize procedures perform better. We see across the board agents who memorize less procedural information they're twice as productive as tenured agents who have memorized everything. Last, trainers, and this is the big, if you're a trainer in the room, I'm sorry, this is going to kind of be contrary to what you've been taught all your life. Trainers who are subject matter experts and who are helpful are going to create better employees. The truth is, trainers who are too helpful create dependent employees. We train people to be dependent, and then we're shocked when they come to us with more questions. So the framework needs to flip all this on its head and deal with kind of the realities here. There's 4 parts to the framework, and this is all built to get to them to that point where they are confident, independent, following those procedures on their own. The first we call align and define, second part design and refine, then train, and then empower and adapt. I'll give you a quick overview and we're going to dive into each one of these here. So align and define is where we're going to define exactly what this agent needs to be able to do if they're going to work independently. And often, all the time, there's a big disconnect between operations and training. Maybe you've had this experience. Somebody comes out of training and you're like, I don't know what they were teaching there. They can't do anything. And you have to start from scratch. That's why we spend so much time in shadowing, okay? We need to get everybody on the same page and have a clear definition of what they need to be able to do. Second, design and refine, we're gonna create digital guides, but it's gonna be very different than the documentation you've seen because they have to be able to follow this without supervisor assistance. And it's refined because guess what? No matter how many times we do this, we never get it right the first time. No plan survives contact with the contact center. And so you have to be able to iterate very quickly to get a solution that they can use independently. Third, we're going to train them in a very different way. It's going to be 20% classroom or LMS training and 80% practice activities. I'll show you what that'll look like. And then finally, we have to train our supervisors to empower and help them adapt. Because if they leave this training and now the supervisor says, oh no, we don't do it that way on our team, or let me just tell you what to do here, they totally sabotage all your efforts there. Okay, so let's dive into these a little bit. Align and define. We run with our clients, we run what we call a find and follow workshop. And the purpose of this is to have absolute clarity on what an agent needs to be able to do. And every single client we talk to says, I don't know that we really need to do that. Like, we already know. We know what they need to do. And every single one has been wrong. So what you have to do is you have to get the right people in the room. A lot of times they just have kind of the subject matter expert, but subject matter expert will be detached from the reality of the job oftentimes. So you need the person who fixed the agent's mistakes, who answers their questions on the job, the person who trains them, ideally someone who's tenured in the role. You need all those perspectives in the room, and then you're going to go through what are the tasks they have to perform, the questions they have to answer, the problems they have to solve, where do they get stuck, and you're going to list all that. What do they do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis? It's an exhaustive list, but that's the list. You need to have digital guides or checklists, whatever it is, for each one of those scenarios if they're going to work independently. And so it's always, I'll show you an example of one here. We did this with a couple of credit unions, and they said, same thing. We pretty much know what people do. After they'd been through the workshop, they're like, we can't believe how much clarity this has given us. There were over 500 things a member service rep or a call center rep would have to do if they were going to do their job correctly. And they were so focused on just what do they need to know, they couldn't figure out why they couldn't do anything. So this gives us, we're starting with the end in mind. We want people to be able to do these things independently. We can't do that unless we have, like I said, aligned and defined on what is expected. Using that, now that we have the map of where we need to go, or the destination, we're going to work backwards. Now this is a key part that we found in transferring information. We make a mistake in transferring information of mixing foundational and actionable knowledge, and it really confuses people, puts a lot of cognitive load on them. So what's foundational versus actionable knowledge? Foundational knowledge is all the background information you need. In fact, this is what we do when we create a foundational course. It's not procedure. We never teach someone how to follow a procedure. We only teach them the concepts and principles they'll need to understand so that when they get to the procedure, they have some sense of what is going on. We want them to understand the neighborhood they're in. So it's the background knowledge of why, who, what. What systems am I using? Who am I going to even talk to on the phone? What does our business do? What are the big principles that I need to understand? And then when we build these courses, we break them down by topic. So you'll take one topic area of the business, and it's a 10 to 20, max 30-minute course. No procedural information. I'll show you an example this would be an example of what, if you're in banking, Zelle, they need to understand what Zelle is. There's going to be a bunch of procedures around Zelle. We're not going to teach them. We'll teach high-level process, very high-level stuff. We're at the 40,000 foot level here. This is simply so that they are familiar when we get to the next part. Now, actionable knowledge. So actionable knowledge is all the stuff they need to do, the stuff they need to reference, the questions they need to answer, the procedures they need to follow. We're going to create digital guides. And I don't like calling it documentation, because when we say documentation, we think of this big 500-page PDF. That does not help anybody do their job. We want to think, instead of encyclopedias, we're thinking recipes. And so we're going to have work aids, we're going to have decision trees, call flows, checklists, whatever they need for that specific situation. There's not a one-size-fits-all. It's for this task, they need this resource. And each one of these has to be findable, followable, scannable. You go back, look at this, say, can they find it in 5 seconds? The specific answer they need, the guidance they need. Can they follow it without a supervisor helping them? And can they scan it so they're talking to someone and following the procedure without having to put that person on hold? If it's a word soup, they've got to say, well, stop, I'm doing some research here. We don't want that. So findable, followable, scannable when we design these guides. So like the one on the left, it's giving them that blue prompt of, this is what you need to ask. And then when they'll select an answer, it's going to just guide them. It's giving them the exact knowledge they need in the moment they're in the conversation. Other times that's not required, and so you might just have a checklist, but for a less experienced employee, they can expand out more detail if they need it. The more experienced employee is at the high level checklist. So we're really trying to work from backwards in. What do they need in that moment? And just giving them that level of information. Okay, now how are we going to tie this all together? We've got our foundational courses, we've got our digital guides, and this is where people make a big mistake. They kind of blow it in the training phase, and they can't figure out why people aren't using their resources. Like I said, trainers want to be helpful, and when they're helpful, they sabotage the future of that employee. So what you want to do is take the foundational course, and remember, 15 to 20 minutes long. It'll be on one topic area. They're going to review that course. You're then going to introduce them to the digital guides. They're just going to navigate. They're going to practice searching for some things. They're going to practice navigating around. They're getting familiar with the tool they're going to use to do their job. And then finally, 80% of the time is practice activities. And the first time is so painful. Because you're going to say, okay, somebody wants to change the address on their invoice. And they're going to search up, and they're going to start it. And you're going to find people are terrible at following directions, because they think they just got to wing it. So they're like, hey, they're trying to be creative, all this stuff, and the trainer is not going to say a thing. They're not going to correct mistakes. They're going to let them get through the whole thing. And after you say, well, how did that feel? I thought I did pretty well. Let's try it again. Let's try it again. Pay a little more attention this time to do it. And they'll do it, and they'll still, oh yeah, okay, I forgot that. Okay, let's try it again. And by like the third or fourth time, they're like, I can really rely on this. And when they do, they're more confident. And then we go to the next scenario, and it goes faster. And the next scenario, and it goes faster, because now they're realizing, I don't have to know this. And sometimes we had a contact center that did this. They were killing it. And after about 3 weeks, they saw their stats dropping. Well, these people had worked at other contact centers where the culture was, if you don't memorize things, you're dumb. That's what they've been told. You're not doing your job. If you have to use the guides, you don't know your stuff. And so we had to do kind of a coaching intervention, sit down, and we discovered this talking through them, and the supervisor said, no, we want you doing this all the time. Those stats went right back up there. So you set the tone in training of what the expectations are and and helping them. And you need to tell them that sometimes, like, why won't you help me? And what I like to say is, I want to set you up for success when I'm not here. So it's better that we struggle now in training than you struggle later when nobody's around. We're going to set you up so you can be independent. So this is an example of what a trainer's guide might look like. It has the topic. It'll tell the trainer what things are going to be covered in that foundational topic. It'll have a couple questions. They can do some discussion of checking some understanding. It's not a test. It's just to fill in some blanks for them. And then there'll be a long list of practice activities that they'll take them in. The advantage is when you have this, your training is no longer trainer dependent. You don't need to have a subject matter expert. You need to have someone who knows how to run these types of trainings, but they don't have to be an expert in your whatever the domain knowledge is. Now you just rinse and repeat for each topic. New topic, practice activities. New foundational course, practice activities, and you run those through until they are confident taking calls. Oops, let me go back one. So, we've gone through this process, we get here, and it's really interesting when they come out. Most of our clients have completely eliminated shadowing and nesting. because they found that when they went into shadowing nesting, they learned bad habits. They were told, oh no, I don't follow the guide, I do it this way, and it's sabotaged. But they'll come out and across the board of those examples I showed you, twice as productive as the tenured agents. And now what they'll do is they'll take those tenured agents and they take them back through the training. One contact center actually had a problem. New hires were criticizing the tenured people because they were doing things wrong. And they would notice, oh, wait, that's not how we do it there. So they had, there's some cultural things you've got to navigate there. Okay, what's the impact? The mental health, we had one client at the public utility, she said, this is the greatest human experiment I have ever been part of. Think about a place where it takes 12 months until you can work independently. That's 12 months of feeling stupid. Nobody likes to feel stupid. If you're in customer support, you want that dopamine rush of, I helped someone and I did it on my own. 12 months before you get that and you wonder why you have high attrition, she said, we don't have people leaving the organization anymore. We have people being promoted out, but we don't have people leaving the organization anymore. I love the story. She had this one woman, always had to escalate stuff. This was a certain call type that came in, always had to escalate it. They'd been to the find and follow training, comes in, and she sees she's gonna escalate it again. She says, you can do this. So she takes the call, she follows the guide, it's super complex, but she does it successfully. Said she jumped up out of her chair, she twirled around and cheered, I did it. That type of confidence changes the culture and the contact center. And then the other big thing is just supervisor bandwidth. When they aren't burnt out, they can do so much more. We had one group, they saved $2.3 million just because the supervisors were freed up to optimize the procedures. They were having things shipped back that weren't broken. They were able to address that before they could never get to it because all they did was answer questions. On the operational impact, you're gonna have repeatable onboarding. It's no longer trainer dependent. Agents leave training hitting full production metrics, not 6 months later. Agents are twice as productive compared to pre-find and follow. Supervisor assists or requests plummet, and the agents are able to adapt to change. So a procedure changes, a policy changes, whatever it is, you can pop out a notification, and they know just to pay a little more attention the next time they go through that checklist or that decision tree. So you get to this place where we call this the knowledge ops flywheel. Flywheel is something that becomes more and more efficient as it goes along. So you're creating digital guides that require no additional training to follow. Employees can find what they need and help themselves. Fewer mistakes, fewer questions, less training time, and that frees up bandwidth for supervisors and trainers to be proactive instead of reactive. Creating, optimizing the digital guides even more, creating more ones that then it just feeds on itself and the whole organization transforms. So here are some questions to ask yourself as you go back to your contact center. Are your training expectations realistic? Are you sitting there saying, I can't believe they can't learn this? And what you're asking is really impossible. There's just too much information. Where are you on this knowledge ops maturity model? I have some handouts here. We have some at our booth you can pick up. Really have a discussion. It's really a great discussion for your team. Where are we behaving on this? Not what technology do we have. Are our guides findable, followable, scannable? Test it with real agents. See if they can follow it without anybody saying, oh no, you need to skip that step. Or yeah, here we do this other thing. And then finally, how is our reliance on tribal knowledge impacting the productivity, consistency, and mental health in our organization? You ask those questions, you're going to get a real sense of what the challenges are. So if you'd like to learn more, we have a book on this. I have a couple of copies here. We have more at our booth. I'm happy to give you a free copy of that. We also have a free 30-minute course on the framework that you can pick up from our website. The software that we do for creating digital guides that are findable, followable, and scannable is ScreenSteps. Our booth is over at 6022. Thank you.